This man was about to go surfing in the sea but accidentally stepped on nothing and fell into the soft sand slope because the slope was steep. The man didn't have time to react and could only instinctively grab the sand with his fingers to barely stop his body. However, the soft sand couldn't support the man's weight for long, and he started to slide down again after a while. Seeing that he was about to slide down the sand slope, the man had to desperately separate his hands and press his face against the surface of the sand to stop his body again. At this point, he was extremely nervous, and the pain in his palms made it difficult for him to breathe. Just at this moment, the phone in his bag suddenly rang. The man wanted to ignore it because he could lose everything if he wasn't careful, but the ringtone was like a life-saving talisman, making him annoyed and confused. Considering that this might be his only way to save himself, the man hesitated for a while and decided to take the risk. So, he slowly released his left hand and tried to open the backpack with one hand. However, just as he touched the phone, his right hand suddenly slipped, and his whole body fell down the sand slope again. At the moment when he was about to fall into the cliff, the man desperately kicked his feet outward and firmly wedged his body on the edge of the cliff. In this way, he once again escaped death. However, the good times didn't last long. Due to the crazily pounding waves, the sand was constantly trembling from the huge impact, and his strength was also exhausted at this moment. Falling down the cliff was just a matter of time. Fortunately, the man's mind was still clear. He started to calculate the frequency of the waves hitting the sand slope. When the next wave struck, he decisively let go of his hands and jumped into the surging waves behind him. Because he was too close to the shore, even though there was seawater as a buffer, his waist hit the reef heavily. He instantly passed out. Fortunately, his strong will to survive let him wake up immediately. He struggled and moved his limbs, floated to the sea surface before being drowned by seawater. In order to avoid being swept into the deep sea, the man exerted all his strength to climb onto the nearby reef. But before he could recover, his palms began to ache excruciatingly. It turned out that there was a big wound in his palms, with even the bones inside clearly visible. But compared to dying directly in the sea, he could bear this minor injury. After resting for a while, the man wanted to stand up and find a way to escape. But at this moment, his legs suddenly lost sensation, and only a few toes were barely able to move. In this critical moment, the man remembered the phone in his bag. He hurriedly pulled off the backpack and tore open the zipper with his mouth. But the phone couldn't be used anymore because it had been soaked in water for too long. Seeing that this method didn't work, the man started to shout for help towards the shore. However, the vast coastline was empty, and the noise from the waves made it impossible for anyone to notice that he was trapped here. The man had no choice but to give up. He then struggled to take off his shirt and bandage the wound on his left hand. Looking at the vast sea in front of him, the man still wanted to find a way to survive. Just then, he suddenly noticed a small island in the center of the sea. Thinking that there might be a glimmer of hope there, he decided to take the risk. So he immediately put on his backpack and jumped into the sea. At first, he successfully swam to the deep sea. But then, he paid the price for his recklessness. Due to insufficient movement of his limbs and the slow consumption of energy from swimming with one hand, he soon experienced shortness of breath and his body sank into the sea. The sudden situation caught the man off guard, and he kept inhaling a large amount of seawater. In the critical moment, the man once again burst out with a desire to survive. He desperately slid with his left hand and managed to float to the water surface before being drowned by seawater. However, before he could take a few breaths of fresh air, the man began to feel dizzy. Because he exerted too much force just now, he no longer had the strength to struggle and slowly sank to the seabed like a speck of dust, feeling small and helpless. However, when a person is no longer afraid of death, they often find rebirth. Suddenly, a surge of water carried the man to the shore. Seeing a glimmer of hope in such a desperate situation, the man's will to survive burst forth again. He immediately threw off his backpack and hung one strap on the reef, and used the other strap to secure himself next to the reef. When the tide finally receded, the man was also exhausted, but just then, a seagull appeared by his side. Seizing the opportunity, the man bit off a piece of meat from his wound. The excruciating pain instantly woke him up, and in a panic, he broke the strap of the backpack and fell heavily on the beach. However, the man was already extremely thirsty. He urgently needed to find some fresh water to replenish his fluids. Soon, he found an empty can in the sand, but inside, there was only muddy seawater. Immediately after, the man suddenly howled in pain. It turned out that his arm had been pierced by a fishhook hidden in the sand. With no other choice, the man trembled as he used his left hand to remove the fishhook. After finishing, the man collapsed on the beach, unable to understand why he had become so miserable. It soon turned into night, and with paralyzed legs, the man could only crawl on the beach. He searched for food like a sea turtle. Fortunately, although this beach was remote, there was no shortage of abandoned trash. After a while, he dug out a torn fish net from the sand and even found two unused rolls of aluminum foil. This proved that someone had been to this beach before. This gave the man hope to survive. He then went to the sea to clean his wounds with salt water. The intense pain made him unable to help but howl. After cleaning up, the man wrapped himself in aluminum foil and the fish net to resist the cold wind at night. Late at night, the sky started to thunder. The man was very excited because he could finally drink some fresh water after a long time. He quickly dug a small pit next to him and collected rainwater using aluminum foil as a container. When the thunder became louder, he immediately opened his mouth to welcome the pouring rain. However, unexpectedly, although the thunder was loud, only a few drops of rain fell. The man grabbed a nearby cup and found it empty. He couldn't believe it and desperately licked the aluminum foil in the pit, but all he tasted was sticky sand. Finally, when dawn broke, the man leaned against a rock, barely alive. At this moment, the seagull appeared again. The man had a plan. He waited for the seagull to approach and then quickly picked up a stick to kill it. However, he failed in the end, since he couldn't catch any living creatures. The man could only continue to crawl on the beach, searching for non-moving seafood. But who would have thought that this beach, which was washed by the waves every day, was completely barren and had nothing at all? Just when the man was about to starve to death, something in the distance caught his attention. He used up his last bit of strength and crawled to it, only to find a damaged surfboard. The man shouted excitedly as if he had grabbed a life-saving straw. After a while, his excited expression suddenly turned gloomy, and he pushed the surfboard aside. Because he was almost completely paralyzed now, let alone surfing, he couldn't even crawl very far. After giving up his last chance, the man completely let go. He lay on the beach, looking at the endless waves, waiting for rescue that he didn't know when would come. However, it was ridiculous that even now, the heavens didn't intend to spare him. Before long, the seawater destroyed the man's last shred of hope. With no escape route left, the man went insane. He immediately used all his strength to climb onto the surfboard and rush into the sea. At this moment, all he had in his mind was death, and he wanted to die in a struggle against fate. Facing the waves that were higher than one another, the man seemed like a tireless machine, constantly sliding with his hands that had long lost consciousness. Perhaps he was conquered by the man's willpower, as suddenly, the sea became calm again. And at this moment, the man was like a deflated balloon, with his strength reaching its limit. He closed his eyes and slowly sank to the seabed. But when a person is no longer afraid of death, they often find rebirth. Suddenly, a fishing boat appeared on the sea surface. They rescued the man who was about to sink into the seabed, and thus, the man survived. Many years later, the recovered man stood in front of the sea once again. In his eyes, there was no longer the fear of the past, only the determination to conquer the sea and the reflection of his former cowardice. Perhaps it also confirmed the saying that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.